Hi, and welcome to our third instalment of our landlord information session. By way of introduction, my name is Anthony Simino, and thank you all for tuning in. This evening we have Michael and also Isabella who'll be joining me to go through a few of the changes that have happened over the last fortnight. One probably no bigger than what was announced on Monday, and you probably heard the cheers, a mixture of both golfers and estate agents cheering that we're able to one, play a round of golf, and two, able to do some open for inspections, which we're all looking forward to getting out and doing on the weekend. So there was a few changes that came through on over the weekend. I'll just sort of cover off on those quickly now. That sort of three steps in moving forward. One of those being that the step one, that open for inspections are back from a real estate level, but also that we're able to get out and about a little bit more. Being able to visit friends and family of 5 visitors over at your property, over your house, and 10 in groups of 10 being able to gather. What this sort of means from a real estate perspective, that we are allowed to run auctions and open for inspections, no more than 10 people in attendance, and obviously obeying social distancing rules. We have made some, in our office anyway, we've made some limitations on a few of our properties that are a little bit smaller in size, that we are going to limit those numbers even further than the 10 that's been mentioned by government. There's also step 2 and 3, which basically just is allowing more people to gather and get together. Basically, it's all to sort of get the economy back up and running and stimulate it again. And again, as I said, I think last week or the week before, a big thank you to Scott Morrison on a federal level and Dan Andrews at a state level for guiding us through these times. It's probably a job that none of us would envy, but thank you them both for a job that they're doing at the moment. So at this point, I'll introduce Michael. How are you going?
Good, thanks, Anthony. Thank you. We're doing it in proper distance this time. So last time Anthony was in one of the other offices here in our office, but this time he's coming to us from home. So he was a little bit nervous about showing everybody his wardrobe in the background, but I think it's just part of commonplace now that we broadcast from different locations. So so excuses if there's a couple of little mishaps here and there as we're trying to switch between screens and things as well. Yeah. Thank you, Anthony. Great news, obviously, about the open for inspections. It's been I suppose it's been a little bit challenging and I suppose different for us to be working in that way where we haven't been doing open for inspections. But at the same time, what it's I suppose required us to do is go back to the old methods, which is really just obviously following up every inquiry, organising individual appointments with people, and to be honest, it's actually been quite effective. So because we've been taking people through on private appointments over the last, it's been 6 weeks now. It's meant that obviously each person coming through the property has firstly had an opportunity to see the property online, had a look at the video before they've actually come through the property, and you've essentially, I suppose, vetted the person a little bit before they've actually come through. So they've been pretty successful inspections when we've been doing them. So it'll be interesting to return back to doing open for inspections on a Saturday like we have, as well as obviously continuing the private appointments. So I think we'll continue the private appointments throughout the week. Like I said, they've been quite effective for us up until now anyway, so we don't want to particularly change those. I just wanted to share something with you all about how we're going about doing open for inspections. So obviously, as Anthony touched on, we're being quite cautious about how we're going back to doing open homes, mindful of the fact that, the government said to us that if this isn't successful, then we could find ourselves back in stage 3 lockdown like we were up until yesterday. So the way we're approaching it is, I suppose, those 6 simple steps. First one being asking all tenants to register for inspections, and same goes for sales as well, making sure people register for an inspection before they come through. We've got a great platform that we use which allows people to book the time online. They confirm their attendance, and then we essentially just confirm that they're there when they come through. So that kind of speeds up the process when they're coming through, and you're not having to spend as much face time with them when they are coming through the property. We're asking tenants to come through and download the COVID Safe app before they come through. I was corrected overnight saying that it should be a requirement, but Apparently, we can't make it a requirement that people download the COVID Safe app before coming through. So we risk serious fines if we force someone to download the app before they come through. So look, we're just making it a recommendation, and in our office, we've all downloaded it. We see it as being, I suppose, a good corporate citizen in doing that and making sure that we've got it, particularly in our role because we are on the road quite a lot. And we're coming into contact with quite a few people. It could obviously be quite difficult for us to contact trace manually. So we find that it's obviously, and we think that it's going to be the most beneficial thing to do to have installed on our phones. And like I said, we'll encourage every attendee to do so as well. Obviously, don't attend if they're unwell. I think that should be quite clear now, but, just reiterating the fact. We've just put in an order, hoping to receive them tomorrow, of hand sanitizer for everybody to be carrying around. So we'll all be carrying around the pump bottles of hand sanitizer. We've been doing that obviously over the last few weeks, but given the higher volume of inspections that we're going to be doing over the next few weeks now, I think we've got 49 booked in for Saturday. We're going to be we're planning on going through quite a fair bit of hand sanitizer. So all attendees will be required to hand sanitize before they enter the property, and we'll be asking them not to touch any surfaces in the property as well. We've also bought a bunch of door chocks as well. So when we're attending properties, we chock the doors open and allow people to walk through again, not having to touch door handles and things. So just trying to minimise that contact that they might have. Keeping distance, obviously 1.5 being the requirement. We're making sure that everybody's abiding by that. There is a 10-person limit per inspection, but obviously, particularly in the CBD, not all apartments are 40 square metres and above. So we are making sure that we just err on the side of caution there. So trying to just limit the number of people in a physical room. So for example, a studio apartment, you wouldn't necessarily want any more than 3 or 4 people in the room at the same time. So really just limiting that as much as we possibly can and making sure everybody's socially distanced while they're there. And just reiterating obviously that 10-person limit, but we'll enforce that on smaller apartments as well. Thanks, Anthony. I might just throw back to you for a little bit, Ant.
Yeah, that's fine. I just might make mention as well, which I forgot to at the start. Q&A is open again as it is every week. So the question mark in the little speech bubble, the 2 speech bubbles there. Make sure you send your questions through. We love receiving them, love answering them later on. So we'll make some time definitely for those. So send them through as we're going. Just a quick question with regards to 49 opens. It's quite a few, so I'm guessing all hands on deck.
Yes, very much all hands on deck. So Anthony has very kindly allowed us to access the sales staff as well throughout this period. So it is really all hands on deck. There's 5 of us doing open for inspections this weekend, and I suspect that it'll be like that for the next couple of weeks until things settle down. We have seen a significant increase from last time we spoke. So a couple of weeks ago when we spoke about the market in the CBD, it was extremely quiet. In the last 2 weeks, that's changed pretty significantly. We've started to see a lot more activity from tenants, obviously inquiring on properties, more willing to come and view properties as well, where there was that reluctance previously. And what we've also noticed is that there's been a lot of tenants now, and I suppose we're inquiring as they're coming through, ending fixed term leases on previous properties because they're seeing that there's value to be had in other properties in the CBD. So, it might be someone moving from a 2-bedroom apartment, or say a 1-bedroom apartment in the CBD where they're paying $450 a week, to being able to get a 2-bedroom for a similar price and lock that in for 12 months. So that's what we predicted. We predicted with obviously significant stock levels, being there an oversupply, you'd expect prices to come back, and then obviously that be absorbed by current tenants that are exiting current leases. So we've seen, I suppose, a little bit of a churn on tenants moving out and moving into other properties, but look, it's a good thing because it obviously means that we're getting some more people into properties and we're leasing a lot more. So I haven't looked at the numbers, but I think week to date, and we are only Wednesday, but last count that I saw week to date, we're already at 8 properties that we'd leased, which is a fantastic effort. They're numbers that we don't really see unless we're in peak period, really, kind of January, February. So it's good to see it at this time of year because, like I said, that's not normal. So we're all hoping that continues, working really hard to make sure that continues. And yeah, certainly all hands on deck, including some of the salespeople as well, involved in opening the rental properties as much as we can.
Good stuff.
Yeah. All right, Anthony, I've just thrown back to you. Did you have any other questions there at all?
Not on that. I think it's one thing that we've made a decision in sales to do, although we're sort of opening up a few properties on Saturday that are vacant. We're sort of trying to limit the tenant ones as best as we can. But I think we're probably, one thing that you'll see us doing a lot more of is private inspections moving forward. We, as from a sales perspective, we found them really useful. It gives people a bit more of an opportunity and a better opportunity to walk through the property and see it. They're sort of not rushed. And we find that when we do the open for inspections on Saturdays, people are rushing between, up to, some buyers that you speak to could see 10 on a weekend, and becomes a little bit of a blur by the end of the day. So I think that private inspection thing is definitely going to be something that we do in sales a bit more moving forward. And I'm just having a chat to a few of the people in PM, product management. They're sort of going to be doing the same thing. They'll rely on their opens, but will also make time for those private inspections when they can. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for that, Anthony. So it might be a good opportunity to welcome and introduce Isabella to this as well. So yeah, obviously you saw from the email that we sent through, Isabella from our property management department is joining us tonight. So Isabella has taken the role as, I suppose, our champion and our expert in the office on this new omnibus legislation. So that's legislation that obviously explains everything about the new Tenancies Act and everything coronavirus. So we'll cross over to Isabella. And Isabella, maybe just start off by telling us a little bit about what that omnibus bill is and what it means for us in real estate.
Hi, everyone. So the omnibus bill is basically a document with emergency measures to adapt the previous legislation to the new situation we're living at the moment, so the coronavirus situation. So it's covering everything that we covered last week as well in regards to the eviction moratorium, suspension of rent increases for the next 6 months. There are some changes in the notice to vacate periods that the tenants have to give us. So we are adapting to all the changes, but at least they are on paper now. They are truly a legislation, something that we can follow and send to tenants, verify questions that are always popping up.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And Isabella, I suppose a few questions I had, and it's probably worth clarifying them as well, because I know we touched on them last week, but we probably didn't go into too much detail. Firstly, VCAT. Obviously, the VCAT process has changed if we're wanting to move a tenant out of the property. There is a moratorium on evictions, but there obviously are some allowances around that for specific scenarios. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what the VCAT process involves now and how it differs to what we were previously doing?
Yes. So the eviction moratorium says that we can evict tenants that are in financial hardship because of the coronavirus situation. So they have to prove that they're in financial hardship. So we have a financial hardship application form that we ask our tenants to fill out. And we also ask them to send the proving documentation, so termination letters, bank statements, payslips, any kind of proof that they are actually in financial hardship. So we can negotiate a discount with the landlord, or if we can maybe defer the rent to a better time where they will be able to pay the landlord back. So people that are just trying to take advantage of this difficult situation and just choose to not pay their rent, we can evict them. So instead of a normal notice to vacate, we have to apply for termination of lease through VCAT. So we go direct to VCAT and apply for a hearing to terminate the lease based on the fact that the tenants are breaching their contract by choosing not to pay the rent, even if they have the means to do it. So only if you have a tenant that are not paying the rent and they cannot prove financial, we still can go ahead with the eviction. Not only that, but we can still go ahead with the eviction if they are causing any damage to the property, if they are threat to neighbors, or to anyone in the building. There are still a lot of options that we can apply to evict a tenant.
Yeah, that's great, Isabella. Just on that point, we had a question come through, an anonymous question. So, what do I need to do if my tenants stop paying rent and abandon the property? So I think it's probably a relevant question given what you were just talking about. Do you want to talk a little bit about how we'd approach that situation?
Yes. So if the tenant abandons the property, it's probably because they are breaking their lease, right? Well, there are some situations here. So in the new act that was released recently, it says that the tenants in financial hardship, proven financial hardship, can give us 14 days notice to break their lease, and they shouldn't pay for the break lease fee. However, it's still not clear if they should be paying for the rent. As it's not clear, Consumer Affairs website says it's not clear. They're waiting for some clarification in mid of May. We're still asking the tenants to be fully responsible for the rent until we find someone new to take over the lease. So if the person just abandons the property and we lost contact with her, with them, it means that we're going to apply for a VCAT hearing and get a VCAT order to chase this person for payment. And hopefully the landlord will have some insurance, because the insurance can cover the rent for rent default.
Yeah, no, I think that's a valid point. With so that I suppose covers the unpayment of rental and people breaking their lease. We have had a couple of situations over the last couple of weeks as well where tenants have actually abandoned properties. They're always a bit of a more challenging one. The way we typically try and handle those is get the tenant to actually admit the fact that they have abandoned the property. In both of those cases, they actually did. So both of them had essentially packed up and left, gone overseas, just as the, I suppose, a travel ban hit. So they were trying to get out of the country, obviously, before all borders kind of shut. They didn't obviously let us know about that. In both cases, decided to leave keys in the mailbox, which obviously isn't the safest place to do that. But thankfully, they confirmed that was the case. So we've been able to go into the properties and just confirm that everything's okay, get some cleaning done, and take the bond. If they're not taking the bond, we can still, or if they're not signing over the bond, then we can still go down the normal path of making an application to VCAT for a bond. So those styles of applications still remain the same. It's more so just around end of tenancy, and if you're wanting to evict a tenant, that process has changed. So obviously, the old notice to vacate followed by an application to VCAT has essentially just now been replaced by a straight application to VCAT for a termination notice, not a notice to vacate. So slightly different terminology, but essentially the same outcome. So and obviously the VCAT members have a little bit more, I suppose, flexibility on how to deal with those cases, and a little bit more direction on approving certain terminations over others. Isabella, the other question I had as well was around Consumer Affairs. Now, I don't know that we've actually received any, I'm not aware of any that we've actually received in the office yet, but Consumer Affairs are offering a new service where they will act as a mediator between landlords and tenants, or agents and tenants, when it comes to rent reductions. So, provided the tenant can prove financial hardship, they can apply to Consumer Affairs if they can't reach a reasonable outcome. Same as landlords, obviously, as well. If you can't reach a reasonable outcome with your tenant, you can apply to VCAT as well. To Consumer Affairs as well, and you enter a mediation process. So, did you want to maybe talk a little bit about how that would work?
Yes. So, if you can if the landlord can get to an agreement with the tenant in regards to the discount for rent deferral, the tenant or ourselves as agents, we can apply for a mediation hearing with Consumer Affairs. It's going to be a person hearing both cases, analyzing both documentation, and giving advice. So they cannot give a legal decision like in a VCAT hearing, but they can give advice, and we're going to be hearing this from a person who has fully knowledge of the new legislation and the new bill that's out. So hopefully, with someone else, a third person intermediating that discussion, we can get into an agreement. That's the whole purpose of that, to finalize that discussion with an agreement and not having to go to a VCAT hearing. So I recently applied myself for one of my properties, and they just advised that they will contact both parties to have a date to discuss and analyze both sides of the situation, but with the much information of how it's going to happen, because everything is new for everyone, for them, for us as agents, and especially for the tenants.
That's really good, Isabella, and I think it might be useful even if you're able to come back and give us a bit of an update on how that one goes, because like you said, it is all new. I know we've made a few termination applications over the course of the last week and a half as well. So we are working through those. I know there's been some requests from VCAT back to us around questions that they've got on our applications and everything too. So whilst we are working through these things, I think it'll be good to share with everybody how, I suppose, the outcomes of those, whether it's a mediation or a VCAT hearing, and kind of discuss how they go, and even certain different circumstances as well. So whether it's a short stay tenant or a normal tenant, and how they assess hardship and all those sorts of things too. I think it'd be good to share those, and obviously we share them amongst the team, but obviously share them with all of our landlords as well. And then the last one as well, which there was quite a few questions that came out of last week's presentation on this one too. So there's the $2,000 grant from the Victorian government. I know we've started receiving a few of those from the government through tenants in the last couple of weeks as well. Did you want to talk a little bit about how that works and what the application process is, and I suppose how we get to a result on that?
Yeah. So that rent relief provided by government as a top-up for the landlords to compensate the discount that they gave to the tenants. Because we are all in the situation. Everybody has been affected by the coronavirus, I could call crisis. Landlords are also in difficult financial. Many of them also lost their jobs, and besides all of that, they are having to deal with tenants asking for discounts in rent. So to help out a little bit, the government is paying up to $2,000 back to the landlord, saying directly to the agent or to the landlord if they are self-managing their property. I'm myself instructing all my tenants that got discounts in rent apply for the rent relief grant. The tenants are the ones who have to start the process. We have to provide them with an agreement of the discount that was given and specifying the period that discount was provided for. We're going to submit these documents to Consumer Affairs, and they will analyze everything and get back to us with a payment plan for these top-up of up to $2,000. Of course, that there are some requirements. So the tenants have to prove financial hardship, which means that the rent cannot be less than 30% of their income. And they cannot have more than $5,000 in savings. Also, they will analyze the total household income cannot be more than $100,000 per year. So they will check a lot of documents, a lot of information, and then they will be able to start the payments. The payments haven't started yet. They are in the process of analyzing all the applications. But as soon as they start paying the landlords back, we're gonna let our landlords know.
That's great, Isabella. And just touching on that too, that measure that we've put in place around the rent, I suppose rent relief or rent reductions, or even starting those negotiations with landlords. The direction from Consumer Affairs has been fantastic on that, and them giving us the proper measure. So the $5,000 in savings and the rent not being greater than 30% of gross income has been really, really helpful. Where we've found that has helped is even in even a couple of discussions that I know myself and a couple of the other property managers have had over the last couple of weeks, where tenants have been asking for, I suppose, a rental reduction due to either reduced income or reduced turnover. But because they're not able to meet those requirements, then there's no requirement then for the landlords to then pass on a discount. Now, some landlords in good faith have said, look, they've been a good tenant, they've been in the property for X number of years, I'm happy to enter a negotiation. But until that point, you're not forced into that situation. So it's nice that we've actually got that ability now to assess it against those measures and refer it back to Consumer Affairs if there's ever any questions or anything about that as well, which has been great. Isabella, we've had another question come through. Now I'll attempt to answer this one here, but it's probably useful for you to jump in and help me out with this one. So the question is, what will happen if the tenant and myself have agreed to a rent reduction? However, they still fail to comply with the rental payment and no update. Will we be able to make a VCAT application? So in that situation, again, we've had a few of those over the last couple of weeks and months, where a formal agreement's been reached, but the tenant is not upholding their end of the deal. The way I understand it is that it's still a breach of the Tenancies Act, because you have reached the new agreement being a reduced rental amount. If the tenant fails to make those payments and essentially falls 14 days in arrears, which seems to be the general measure that we've always used, then you can apply for a termination notice under the not complying with the Act section. I haven't got the exact section number, and I'm sure Isabella would know it. But yeah, we can apply for it under there, and then it would be a process of, I suppose, providing evidence that you've entered into the arrangement, the tenant hasn't met the agreed rental payments, and whether there's a payment plan formed off the back of that with potential follow-ups or a potential adjournment, or whether it leads to a straight termination. I suppose that would be a VCAT member to decide, but I don't believe we've had any of those instances actually heard yet at VCAT. There is one point that's interesting that's important to clarify there as well. We had a situation where there was a tenant who had short paid rent before the 29th of May, and was actually in the notice to vacate queue at that point. So that actually received the notice, which was dated before the 29th of March, not 29th of May, 29th of March. That hearing went to VCAT under a normal possession order arrangement, and the member was willing to provide a possession order in that case. Now, they obviously didn't at the time. The landlord was happy to accept a payment plan from the tenant, but essentially, if there's any pre-existing arrears that's pre-29 March, and there's an outstanding either an outstanding VCAT hearing which has been adjourned, or there's been a notice to vacate which is dated pre-29 March, then it will be heard like any other matter, because they're essentially using the 29th of March as the commencement date for the COVID-19 omnibus bill. So yeah, important to make note of that, and we're making sure that any of those I suppose long-standing arrears are being addressed in the right way as well. Isabella, is there anything that you wanted to add to that at all?
No, I think you covered everything, Michael.
Okay. All right. Just yeah, obviously, any kind of questions, or sorry, anything further on that the VCAT application? Nothing there at all. I kind of covered off on that. Okay. Yeah. Perfect. We've just had another message come through. We'll just push that one through. Another question. So with the new omnibus bill, and Isabella, I think this one you can answer. With the new omnibus bill, if I agree to let my tenant to terminate their lease, will I be able to request them to provide me with 28 days notice rather than just 14 days? So yeah, a little bit of confusion there, obviously, between the 14-day and 28-day notice. Tenant wanting to terminate, how that, whether they can still give us a 28-day notice, because I know there was a little bit of confusion around that, or whether they can just give us 14. What's the rules around that, Isabella?
So we got clarification with REIB in regards to that. They assumed that the law was a bit confusing in the way that was written. And even in Consumer Affairs website, it says that they're still waiting for mid-May legislation to come out, because that was really confusing. But the government confirmed that the tenants still have the right to serve a 28 days notice if they are in a periodic lease. If they are in financial hardship, though, proven financial hardship, they can serve 14 days notice.
Okay. So I suppose the distinction there is that if it's a normal end of lease, the intention of the Act was not to remove the normal 28 days notice. So if you're planning on vacating a property under normal terms, you give your 28 days notice and you move out, and landlord needs to abide by that. But if they're in severe financial hardship, or there's a list of other things there, around being I think your life being threatened and a few other pieces, then they can give a 14 days notice to vacate, which have always been the case anyway. Those 14-day notices, they've been there. They're not very widely used. They're only really used obviously in those extenuating circumstances, but it very rarely ever happens. The majority of notices that we receive are 28 days end of I suppose periodic tenancy notice. So they're still allowed. No, perfect.
Yes, the tenants still have the right to serve the 28 days notice. And Michael, even with our tenants suffering financial hardship, if we can negotiate more than 14 days notice, we are always asking them to give us the 28 at least. So fortunately, we didn't have any case that gave us only 14 days notice, even if they are in financial hardship. It's everything based on negotiation with tenants that are also being understandable in regards to the landlord situation.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's very good. Yeah, and look, and I don't know that we've had any disagreements with tenants or anything around that as well. We've had a couple of tenants vacating and looking at other options, I suppose, moving out and seeing if they can move into other properties, obviously, because there are some, I suppose, some cheaper properties out on the market at the moment. But yeah, it doesn't seem like we've had any disagreements or anything with tenants. I think everything's been straightforward there. Thank you for that, Isabella. I'll see it will, as we continue for the next little bit. If there's any more questions, we'll direct them towards you. With commercial tenancies, I just thought it would be important to obviously touch on those briefly as well. We gave a bit of an update on what the code of conduct was in our last presentation, so obviously encourage everyone to go back and have a look at that. We'll make the link available in the email that we send out after this as well. But with the commercial code, the regulations were released last week, so that's given a lot more clarity around what needs to be followed, how to deal with certain circumstances. Because I know we've received a lot of questions from existing landlords and other landlords as well that are looking at ending commercial tenancies, because there seems to be a lot of non-payment out there happening commercial. The regulations have come out and have clarified a lot of the circumstances there, and it's I've been encouraging landlords to go and seek as much legal advice as is required, because obviously being the regulations and being commercial leases, typically it's a lot more complicated than a standard residential lease. We've been guiding a few landlords through some circumstances where we can and where we've got the knowledge to do that, but still recommending legal advice where required, particularly where tenants are refusing to pay rent at all, because obviously that makes it quite a difficult situation, because obviously evictions aren't allowed. And from my understanding of the regulations, even if a tenant refuses to pay altogether because they've had a zero, their turnover is reduced down to zero, the eviction becomes quite difficult. But there are provisions there to, I suppose, require the tenant to demonstrate they've actually tried to mitigate their losses, and they've not essentially just use this as an opportunity to take the foot off altogether and not produce any income. But we've already seen some good outcomes from that as well. We've had one commercial tenant who has actually come to us and said, look, based on the government benefits they've been receiving, and obviously commercial tenants can access quite a number of benefits. So there's JobKeeper and there's the Business Boost cash flow and a range of other things that they can access. One commercial tenant who said he had a dip in turnover around 40%. With all the government benefits that they'd received, was in a position to still pay full rent. So was happy to do so, and potentially enter a discussion with their landlord later on down the track if circumstances got worse. But based on that reduction in turnover, but the government benefits they'd received, then they were happy to continue paying full rent, which was I think it was a fantastic result. And again, mirroring what Anthony said about the government, they've done a fantastic job in responding to this whole thing, whether it be government benefits that they're giving to businesses, benefits that they're giving to individuals, putting like legislation in place extremely quickly around this and making sure they've made the rules as clear as they possibly can. It's been fantastic that we've had such great guidance. Not to mention the fact that, 6 weeks in and we're essentially back to doing what we were doing 6 weeks ago. Sure, we're social distancing and we're hand sanitizing and doing all those sorts of things, but we're essentially, 80% of the way there, which is fantastic. So it's been great to see that we've been able to recover so quickly, particularly when obviously a lot of countries overseas are still struggling. So it's it's really good. Anthony, I've had a look. There doesn't seem to be any other questions at all. Did you have anything further to add at all?
No, I think it's another opportunity to thank, Isabella and also our project managers for the hard work and hours they're putting into at the moment. It's been through the calls that we've been doing and the social distancing when we see each other in the office, but it's a lot that they're sort of having to sort of navigate through constantly with all these changes. But they're doing a great job, and just wanted to thank. I know Isabella's with us now, but also Hayley and Kayani and Maha and Maya and Yuli that as well, and everyone that's sort of chipped in. Jonathan as well for chipping in from a leasing perspective from sales and everyone. So just wanted to thank everyone for the hard work they're doing.
Yeah, no, I'll mirror that as well, Anthony. It's I think we've spoken at the last two events actually about the fact that you were obviously working in different ways and everything like that, but none of it would have been possible without the team that we've got around us and supporting us. They've been fantastic at our morning check-ins and our evening check-ins, and like Anthony said, social distancing. We've split the team now into two separate groups, so we don't cross over, and we've got that kind of business continuity plan in place and everything as well, and everyone's embraced that, which has been fantastic. So like I said, it's challenging times, but it's fantastic to have a team around us that supports us and the decisions that we're making so well. And like Anthony said, with Isabella and Kayani volunteering for these two catch-ups, and we're going to have the rest of the property management team come through here as well, and hopefully the sales team too will join us as we're getting towards the end of this too, and we'll provide some updates on some awesome sale results over the next couple of weeks, I'm sure. It's been fantastic to be able to do this, but it's also really good being able to communicate with you in this way too. And come to you in the safety of your own homes through video. So I'd expect that this is something that we continue to do on a regular basis. We were talking only today about the fact that obviously there's the Tenancy Act updates coming out later this year. We'd like to be able to present that to our landlords in this format and this forum, because I think it'd be quite useful, being able to deliver those messages to you, so everyone's kept informed on what's happening and how we're handling certain things.
I've just received a message from Sandra. She's watching. She's mentioned what about us? So referring to her, we haven't forgotten about yous. We're thanking everyone, but no, we should thank them as well. They've That's quite funny.
And that was quite good. No, and definitely Joe and Sandra, even though there might be a few technical issues which we were addressing earlier today, but no, it's like I said, it's been great having everyone involved. Joe, Sandra, the whole team. It's been like I said, it's been a very interesting time, but we're all getting through it together, and it's nice to see a bit of a glimmer of hope at the end as well, where we're going back to normal, doing open for inspections on weekends and things. So it's all getting back to normal. Isabella, just before we go, is there anything from your end at all? No, you're on mute. Sorry, Isabella.
I think we covered basically everything, but just would like to let the landlords know that we are working really hard to get the properties leased. We are negotiating with tenants 24/7, following up all the inquiries. We definitely had to adapt to a lot of changes lately, but we are doing our best here, and I think we are doing really well, actually.
Doing a great job. Everyone's doing a great job.
Yeah, no, completely agree, Isabella. You are, and you're right. That's our That's our morning and night. That's the first things that we talk about, the conversations that we've been having. And there's been a lot of that. And I think that's, again, another benefit that's going to come out of this is the fact that we spent a lot more time on the phone with people and talking to people about certain situations and understanding, I suppose, everybody's personal situation that they're going through during this period too. So yeah, no, I appreciate obviously everybody's time that they've been spending on that, but also our landlords and tenants for being patient with us as well, and allowing us the opportunity to kind of discuss those things with them too. Perfect. All right. Well, I think we'll leave it there. We haven't got any other questions that have come through. So thank you everybody who's tuned in again tonight, and everybody that's I suppose watching the recording of this after the fact as well. Encourage you to send through as many questions as you like to Anthony and I. I'll put our email address up on screen too. So mine and Anthony's emails are up on screen there as well. Welcome any questions or comments or anything that come through from anybody at all. Whether it be a landlord or even family and friends who want some advice on certain things. I'm more than happy to provide that to them. And yeah, I think it's about it from our end. Obviously, stay safe, stay home where possible, obviously. And we look forward to catching up with you all again in a couple of weeks' time. Thank you.